Good evening, everyone. We'll begin this evening's budget hearings at this time. John, do you want to preface anything? Or?
No, just that we're starting with page 66, which is the city clerk.
Okay.
And I'll turn it over to Betsy for any comments, and then we'll do what we do, take questions.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Betsy.
How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. So you see my budget before you. I want to thank you for creating a full-time extra person in my office. It has seemed to help as of right now. We seem to get things in the office done. We're working on exact items that need to be done. It's a slow process because the learning in my office is a little difficult. Elections is coming up. It's a gubernatorial election year, and not as bad as the presidential, which some of you work in my office. Thank you very much, helped out in my office, and saw the trays and trays and trays of absentee ballot applications that came in and what we had to do with them. Well, they now changed the forms, or are going to change the forms when the Secretary of State's office finds time to add, change illness to sickness. So, and there's two other categories they're changing. If you are working out of town or out of state and a commuter, you can get an absentee ballot application, get an absentee ballot. And if you are a caretaker of somebody, you can get an absentee ballot. But with the change from illness to sickness, that means anybody who is feared of maybe coming in contact, maybe waiting in line, maybe getting something, they can get an absentee ballot also. So if we have a pandemic again, or if they're afraid that they might catch something, they can get an absentee ballot. So that will increase again this year. Don't know how much. Have an extra person in the office, but as you know, we were there days, hours, sometimes late at night, trying to get it done. Plus do everything else that we do in our office. So it's a tough issue. I don't have anything else to say, I don't think.
Members, questions? Alderman Wilson.
Thank you again, Betsy, for being here. Of course, I've been in the office, so I know exactly what it goes like during election time, but even a normal day. So I do thank individuals in your office for what they do. Kind of for the public more so, could you just list or explain just some of the things that go through your office, other than people thinking of the election process, but what other things happen?
Well, first we get just about every phone call that can possibly be gotten comes into our office. But we do land records, we do anything to do with trade name certificates, dog licensing, fishing licensing, liquor permits, freedom of information requests, claims, summons, fire loss claims, accidents, birth, deaths, and marriage, which includes cremations and burials. We do all the agendas and minutes posting on our calendar board and on our website for the 85, 86 meetings, committees, boards that we have. We post those. That's not always monthly, sometimes it's bi-monthly, sometimes there's special meetings. So that's almost a job in itself for somebody. We deal with conveyance tax. We do a lot of state forms for the state. We do paternity, adoption, records that we have to change. We do land record books that have to be verified and deeds have to be sent back to people. We do waterfowl, anything with fishing, hunting, sporting. We do itinerant vendor permits. Fishing was somebody else's. We balance every day. We're the register of beekeepers. I take care of the bond packages when they come to me. I do postings of legal notices. I'm the secretary for the council, so I do the council meetings. Genealogy, which takes quite a while. People send us their genealogy requests looking for relatives or how to do that. We do Muni Code, which is when you have an ordinance, we put it into an ord bank and then publish it and do the code of ordinances and the charter and update those. We also do, because you're the zoning board, we do the zoning regulations and update those. If there's a question on the ballot, I have to do the explanatory text on the question on the ballot and put out posters for those and put things into the absentee ballot applications. I take all the resignations come to me. If someone resigns from a board or committee, they come to me, and then I disseminate them. We do Mylars and the maps. We file those. Want some more? Or is that good?
That's good. That's good. I just wanted, individuals to realize that, when they look at it, an office of 4 or 5 individuals, and to do all of that work, and, you're talking building permit individuals coming to you for different things as well. Your office is busy. You got a lot of work that you are doing, and it's nonstop. And so, for what's been proposed for the budget and even the additional individual funded through ARPA funds in round 2, it's not just something that's a want, it's a need that has its benefits will show with the revenue, one that comes in, but also the level of work and expertise that's needed to make sure you take care of each and every individual that comes in and out of the office. So I just kind of wanted individuals to know that part, so thank you.
Thank you for recognizing that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Alderman Singh?
Thank you. So thank you for all the work you guys do, and I have witnessed myself. It's a lot of work. My actually question is, are all these services that you just said, are we trying to cater these things online as well, or people have to physically come and give their request and everything is like paper oriented, or can we switch some of this stuff on online platform so it's easy for people, instead of coming to City Hall and doing everything physically, they can probably make their account, and some of these services they can just request online and they can get it online.
Well, my assistant, Roseanne Muscarella, had the great idea of having subscriptions to land records, which we do. So attorneys, businesses, and everything, and we make really good revenue off of that. The last 3 months, we made $4,200 off of subscriptions to land records. So you can stay at home, get a subscription, see what we see in the office, and get your copies that way. Birth certificates, a little more difficult. People can order them. We have people all over the world that were born in Norwich and order their birth certificate, but we have to be very cautious on that issue. Because we need to see their identification. We need to have certain criteria met before we issue their birth certificate to them. Hunting and fishing, people can do it online at home, but we have the population doesn't have a computer, doesn't have a paper, doesn't have a computer, doesn't have internet access. This year, Fish and Game decided to not give booklets out, and all my fishing people who are my age and older are like, well, what do I do? Well, they have this little square you can put on. I don't have a phone. How am I going to get a fishing boat? How am I going to know a fish to catch? So it's difficult for some of the things to do online. Liquor permits, those can't go online. You have to come in the office and have me stamp your liquor permit if you need a liquor permit for your business. So some things just can't be online, but we put as much as we can. We have people fill out their marriage license application online, and then they still have to come in and sign it in front of us and we give them the oath.
So-
Justices of the peace, same thing.
So the biggest issue for you is the verification process
Correct.
for people. But
Correct.
I'm sure that can be done through one way or another if we invest in technology sooner or later. Because if I can make my account with IRS, I can make my account with banks. Of course, there is a provision available. But my question is, do you see these kind of things happening through our department in future if we invest in technology? Or do you think it's going to be a bad choice to do it?
Well, sometimes you have to be careful with technology. I'm dealing with social security numbers on things. I'm dealing with a lot of fraud on things sometimes. So I have people who come in to the window or on the phone and say, I have no identification, I need my birth certificate. I know everything on it, but I don't know you. I don't know who you say you are. So we have to be really cautious on giving out things in our office. Because like I said, once you get that birth certificate, you can get a driver's license, you can get a social security card, you can get a whole bunch of things, you can open bank accounts, you can get mortgages. So sometimes online is good, and other times it's not good in an office like mine. I still have to have paper, everything I do is paper. My vault is filling up, it's over full, because I've run out of room for what I have and what I need.
Now, do we make any backup copies?
Oh, yes.
Like soft copy as well, or everything has to be like
I have
paper?
the originals in my office of most things, but I do have a backup. So if
Okay.
somebody comes in and thinks, in the old days, they pull out their mortgage, oh, I don't have to pay my mortgage anymore, well, guess what? I have a backup of that, I'll reprint the page.
But nothing is on the computer,
The backup?
the backup.
The backup is.
So nothing is
The
scanned?
backup is not even in the state.
Okay,
My backup is in a vault somewhere else.
okay,
So just in case,
yeah,
it's in a whole nother state. We pay for that, of course, but it's the safety of, if we had a fire, heaven forbid, a flood, heaven forbid, we'd be able to get those records back.
okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you very much, Betsy.
Thank you. You're welcome.
The next budget is elections.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Cheryl Slater, Republican Registrar of Voters. You want me to just dive in?
Please.
My partner Diane Daniels has COVID, so you get to hear from the new person. I've been in office for 7 months. So I'm going to do my best. I'll do my best to answer your questions. And if I can't, I will look it up and I will email you a response.
Thank you.
Our budget came from Diane Slater, my predecessor. So knowing her to be quite accurate, I'm assuming that the budget is accurate. And so we run a similar budget every single year. So you'll notice that there are not many changes as you look at last year by year. This present year, we did not have a primary, which freed up a lot of money for other things, which was really helpful because we had redistricting and we had a new count, and a new registrar we had to be trained, and we had 2 new deputies that had to be trained. So a bit of money got moved around to accomplish those other surprises that were part of our year. So moving forward in the fiscal year, you'll see that most of the numbers move straight across. There's just 2 small changes, and they both have to do with wages. We now have 2 deputies in our office. It's been a little while since we did, but we do now. And minimum wage changes twice in this new fiscal year. Goes up $1 each time. And so that's going to affect our deputies. And so we're asking that they be paid $15 per hour moving forward, starting in July with the first up in the minimum wage. And the second one is for the registrars. We are asking for a 3% increase each of the next 2 years for a total of 6% in light of the inflation, which I found this morning is 8.5%. Kind of frightening for all of us, I'm sure. There's probably a lot of things coming down through the Secretary of State's office. We've been informed about some of them, but we have no idea how they're going to affect us financially. So moving forward, if there are effects, you'll hear from us. But as it stands, we're going to try to make the budget pretty much the same as last year, more for us moving forward. So we'll take questions if there are any.
Alderman Wilson?
Good evening. Thank you for being here. You may be able to answer. So I'm reading the book, and I look at the election workers, of course, it has the salaries or the rates of pay, and it has the cost of one and the cost of 2 elections. Is this budget for the potential of 2 elections, so a primary and the general election? Is that what's funded in this budget?
Every year we run on the assumption that we will have 2 elections.
Okay.
We don't always.
Yep.
And we don't know until we get close enough to
Correct.
figure that out, what we have to put in the budget.
Yep.
The money's not there.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that point. Then the other point that I have is I know with redistricting,
Excuse me, before you ask the next one, Betsy was just mentioning that sometimes we have 3 elections in a year. We do not budget for that unless we know in advance, which I'm assuming we do. You're still dealing with the GUI, sorry.
the next question I have is I know one of the concerns that we've had over the years, especially even with redistricting, the fact that transportation becomes a concern, getting individuals to and from certain locations of where polling places are. So we've got several that are tricky, even within the new redistricting. I know the senior center, Stanton, and I want to say maybe a HEPA. Could be wrong. I think it's a HEPA because that was the American Legion for a few election cycles. So have you guys considered over the last year or so possibly adding a line item to the budget for transportation? So the contracted part of bus services being available. I know like we've used First Student, several of their buses over the time. So that being a line item in the budget so that you are planning ahead of needing that. Because I think it is a huge piece as we look at where affordable housing is and all of those things that we take that into consideration.
Thank you for that question. In the past, meaning quite a few years ago, they did hire buses to bring people in, and it has not been done in recent years. Diane and I have discussed it only briefly. We've been pretty full out this particular stretch that I've been in office. But it is something that we are discussing as we look at the change in demographic, especially for the voting district that goes to Huntington, because we gained such a large swath of people there. And they are quite a bit further away from Huntington than the other voters. We don't really know what kind of needs we have until we start hearing back from people. I've only received one call suggesting that she would have trouble getting to the polls, and I recommended that she consider an absentee ballot if she did not have a friend who could drive her. But that's really the only input we've had back. We do keep on our wall a list of phone numbers of people who volunteer to drive voters to voting stations. And we try to update that each year. The list is getting shorter and shorter. But if we feel that we need buses, we'll know better after our primary, if indeed we have a primary this year. Because right now, it's totally untested. But it certainly is something that we could consider, but of course, that's more money into the budget. So,
Absolutely, absolutely, and I understand that point, and that's the reason, the reason I ask is I know we do have trouble, with the seat bus running the entire day of an election and all of those things, and so, for me, it's just the planning of that being an issue, with even redistricting, so that's the only reason I had to ask the question, so thank you.
we were thinking we might get a greater response from our redistricting postcards that we sent out. People concerned about their new voting station or how they're going to get there. So far, we've had one, which is rather surprising. I really was expecting more. I don't know how the buses run throughout town.
Takes a while.
If people have already figured out that they can get there, I don't know.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the other issue, is it will take an individual while, so whereas they may be in and out of some of our polling stations in a matter of minutes, the bus ride to get there could be 30 minutes to an hour, depending on where they are. So that's a bigger concern, whereas having to direct transportation that's kind of doing a loop throughout a designated area, and drop-offs would be more feasible. But those are things to talk about, but for me, it's just making sure that that's something we're considering possibly when we're looking at the budget overall.
One of the things we do need to consider, and we've had no feedback, and so I don't even know how to begin to consider it, is if we need another polling station or moving Huntington to a more central location, because that's such a large swath. We don't have a building to have it in that we can think of. There may be something that we haven't thought of yet, but until we start getting feedback, we don't really know, are the people in the new areas that are moving to different voting stations, are they bus bound? Do they have their own cars? Do they walk? Do they not vote? I can't say that we really know those answers yet. So there's probably a lot of possibilities up in the air that we're going to be kind of filtering through our grid as we see how a primary runs in an election cycle, and this is a fairly big one, gubernatorial this year, so we have a lot of things on the ballot. I expect to see a lot of people out. So I'll probably be better able to answer this next year.
No, not a problem, and I think you answered my third question, so thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next budget is on page 54. It's city manager budget. And other than salary and benefits, there's no program changes to this budget this year. I do note that we had the fire service coordinator request last year that was not funded, and it wasn't funded, it wasn't requested this year either. As you can see on top, it was actually not requested, so just the two individuals in my office. The only other item that's unique to our budget is that we have the Connecticut Conference of Municipality dues, and that's the last line item on the budget, line item budget. That hasn't gone up in about 10 years. It's been very consistent. I'll take any questions.
Members, Alderman Wilson.
Good evening. It's really not a question of, per se, the budget numbers here. With the ARPA request for the grant writer, what department do you anticipate that individual falling in?
Where would it fall? It would probably be under my supervision.
Okay.
I think because it's a general
Yes.
position, it would be likely to come under my budget.
Okay. And then my second question, I mean, it's more towards another department, but maybe more so the rationale of kind of explaining the decision of the thought process, which we kind of talked about the other day with the public works switch, and that individuals will still be doing the tasks that they're given as their current crews or whatever it is moving forward, if I'm correct, yes? So like the recreation crew will work with recreation maintenance, and his streets will work with their given crews of where they are at the moment,
Yes.
even with the move.
They just will have different supervision, and we'll have consolidation of equipment storage and equipment. So we get savings in that consolidation area. Ultimately, we're looking to consolidate the union. That's the next step. That will allow us to interchange people. So if we need additional people on a particular day, let's say it rained for 3 days and they have to catch up on preparing a athletic field, they could call upon people in the public works side. And vice versa, if during the winter, they could do items that they may not do now, so.
Okay. Answered all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members, questions? Alderman Gould?
John, do we have office space for the grant writer, or do you expect this position to be more sort of at home or in
No,
another location?
I think well, I tell you, you could do this position from a computer.
Remote location?
I always like to have a physical office for a person. Might be in my office, I don't know, we'll have to move the table around or something, but we'll find a place. But I think that if there was ever a position that could be a position done remotely, this would be one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Well said, John. Thank you.
The next is the City Council on page 52. I'll make a few comments and then I'll leave it to the mayor if he has some comments. The only area that changed in this budget from the previous year was an additional $25,000 for the NCDC, I was going to say stipend, it's not really a stipend, for the contribution. Yeah, for it. Other than that, the budget remains about the same. In some areas, there's actually some reductions. Anything, Mayor?
No, that's accurate. I mean, the reductions you mentioned, marketing and multicultural development, those are zeroed out. But,
Right.
but that's basically it, the change, difference. We're just very busy, I will say that, and the extra 25 for NCDC, I think, is sorely needed. And although some of the revenue that was projected for them through the allocations for business development citywide, that I think 10% payment, I think, has begun. So that's providing and helping them. As you know, some of the workload that is now there for those business development plans that are being considered for rec and rescue dollars, we also have access to skilled personnel to assist with those assessments. And it will also assist our planning department in the pinch. All of that has been, I think, shared here as well, but that's about where we stand. Kevin Brown is here. I don't know if anybody wants to query him, myself. The floor is yours, all of you guys. Let's go with the pro temp. He's been quiet.
Yeah, and that's always trouble. So, simple question, and again, not as pointed as it might sound out, but what does the additional $25,000 buy the city of Norwich?
Extra ability to respond to increased workloads, basically at NCDC. Kevin is by himself at this time. The workload continues to grow almost daily this week. Some new things to talk to you about directly and then share with the caucus. That workload has timelines to themselves. Deadlines have to be met. And that's really what it's about. It's not hiring a second person, but it's creating some revenue capacity to respond, basically. You miss a call, you miss a deadline, you miss an application, that creates problems. Case in point, the 2 large grants that we're seeking to help with the Business Park North, they had very tight deadlines, and we had to meet those, and we have been doing that. But then there's follow-up beyond that as well, particularly we'll know, I think, by September, at least on one of those major grant applications. If that is successful, boy, the workload is really going to pick up, very much so. That's with the Business Park North. But there are other demands on the office right now. I personally think there's enough work to have 2 people like we once had with Mills and with Jason, but that's not in the schedule. That's not in the budget right now. It gives a little more flexibility. I don't know if, Kevin, if you wanted to join us at the microphone, please.
Kevin Brown, Norwich Community Development Corporation, 66 Franklin Street. It's a fair question, but I think the mayor has laid it out. It's emerging requirements, really. And, as we've all talked about, and as I think we've all dealt with, at a time when the federal government is throwing money at us, having the capacity and the personnel to manage the intake of those dollars or the pursuit of those dollars is definitely a cost center for us that the organization wasn't, prior to this moment, prepared to do. I don't want to lean too heavily on it, but I made a decision, and I've actually joked about it on this day, that I sat remotely in my first board meeting before I was hired in June, and I listened to the board of directors and the staff of NCDC say, well, we'll wait till the new guy gets seated and then we'll figure out the budget. And at that time, the decision that was on the table to consider whether or not the organization could even sustain itself through the year was whether or not to hire a number 2. And I will just tell you frankly that I made the decision early on, we're going to load up and carry on without one, create some hire lag so that we can get through the year and see where we stand after a year. And having done that now for almost a year, I can tell you that I do have a plan to hire a number 2 in the organization. That $25,000 will not obviously account for that, but it certainly is going to help make that move in addition to the emerging requirements that the mayor described. And then if you back away from this whole substantive or, directed conversation, there is just the aggregate view that says for 5 years NCDC has been flatline funded at $150,000. If you inflate those dollars over 5 years, it probably puts you at $179,000, and now our budget is $175,000. So there's something in that math as well, I think, that just sort of represents a catch-up of where probably the organization should have been funded before.
You still have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you for that. We work with. So, for me, and I'm sure that we'll debate this more, and there'll be more conversations, in the various caucuses. But to me, the grant writer piece, the NCDC piece, mayor's office piece, right? Those are all cogs in a machine that the right now is trying to get itself going, right? And actually, it is moving forward pretty well. I've complimented NCDC a number of times in the last, let's say, 6 months on the direction that we're going in. And that's all great to see. But in my mind, right, from what I see, as I said, the cogs are starting to fit together, but we're not completely there yet. You know, I've said out loud in various meetings that, you know, I would like to see this grant writer piece funded by ARPA be a person that serves NCDC, serves what we hope that will be the cultural coalition, and serves the city at the same time, so that we have a coordinated effort to chase after these dollars that Kevin's talking about and other grant opportunities. So I'm just concerned that just right now from my chair, it feels a little bit like we're throwing money at economic development, which we should invest money in economic development.
If I may,
Throw money at
Oh, I'm sorry.
economic development would not be, you know, that would not be the best of all possible situations. But there may be pieces to this puzzle that, you know, that I'm not seeing yet. So I'll defer to the city manager.
yeah, I vision a grants manager being a generalist to not only city departments, but NCDC. There's a lot of duality there, that they are doing some of the grants, grant writing right out of NCDC, some major ones, obviously, like the RAISE grant, and working on the entitlements grant from federal government through Congressman Courtney. So the grant writer will kind of bring that together. Rather than a puzzle, I call it a mosaic, because it should, they all should balance each other out on that. So if you fund the grants writer, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a key position for the city. And I know that during the goal setting session, I think a lot of the council people were comfortable with that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Alderman Wilson.
Good evening. So first, my first question would be, and I think probably the mayor, you could probably answer it. The ARPA allocation that we had to global cities, was that the multicultural program that was in this before? I'm just curious. So like, I know before it was funded at the 29,000. Was that what that was for, or was it something else?
The $25,000 levy that was, or value that was there for multicultural was, it was to be a partial match of what the Chelsea Groton Bank initially provided for 3 straight years, $100,000. If you recall, in last year's budget, the council, with ARPA dollars, designated a sum of $50,000 for 3 years.
Correct.
Again, it's somewhat of a match. What is now a grant of $50,000 from Chelsea Groton. So basically, that program is somewhat level funded by those 2 efforts. But because of that, it really didn't make sense to keep it there in this budget, or on the marketing side either at that point. Although I do recall talking to John about a marketing position for the city as well, as we were leading up to him submitting his budget to us. That's not here yet. But I still find value in that whole concept. Marketing has been done almost on a project basis since I've been mayor. Now this is the 5th year, but not on a city-wide basis. I still contend that that's a need that we lack right now. For example, marketing dollars in the most recent year were used through John's office, through his permission, to enhance more outdoor lighting downtown, to make downtown more brighter, more visible. People feel safer when they can see things at night. And that's what we've done. Marketing dollars were previously used for the Passport to Norwich program. Now, some of those dollars were actually carried forward from budget years 19 and 20, because with COVID and the shutdown, the plans to use those dollars never took place. We had those 4 commercials made. They're really nicely done. And then the restaurants are already closed, like the rest of the state. So we stopped. We didn't spend that money. It made no sense. Can't send people to a closed door.
Absolutely.
So those funds were carried forward, and then they were applied into that program. Other dollars in the multicultural were used to help pay for the upgrades in some of the electrical conduits, adding one on Broadway side here for City Hall, where we didn't have one, down on the Bath Street parking lot where festivities would take place. Those are some of the things that those dollars were used for, to enhance what was the program that Chelsea provided us. And I will tell you, the council's decision last year, putting $50,000 aside for 3 years, was really helpful, because they were still negotiating with Chelsea Groton Bank to see if they would continue beyond the 3 years, and that helped them make that decision to do so. Yes, at a lower level, but combined, the program is basically at $100,000, again, just not all from the bank.
Excellent. And I just wanted to know, I kind of figured that. I just wanted to make sure where it would have fit in the grand scheme of things in this budget. My second question would be kind of more for the general public. The $5,000 in for the school building committee, what would those funds possibly be needed to be used for? Just kind of curious.
I thought that was to make sure that we had support staff.
Okay.
Joe could speak to some of that a lot more than I can, but just like other committees have assistants, like public safety last night.
Yep.
We wanted to make sure that the information is being captured properly, recorded, and I believe that's what it's for.
And Stacy's vice chair of the building committee, so she might
Right,
have
so-
a little bit more insight than I do.
Mapping, Mylars.
Yep.
Whatever the consultant might have needed.
Okay.
That, we had to pay for to provide him with.
Perfect. Because I remember, I want to say it was last budget cycle we did in the capital for the architect piece, but this time that's more so for the services they may, or help they may need. Okay.
Yes.
And then, the last question is more so related to the ARPA, the projects. I know NCDC is planning to take on an additional load of projects, and kind of getting into that theme of, the conversation of workload. How do you see these additional projects that your organization will kind of help oversee, fitting into the bigger puzzle or the need for additional staffing? And you can answer that.
Thank you, Alderman. I appreciate the question, and I think it's a leading question in a way. Because the fact of the matter is, it does increase the workload. Now, let's not mistake the fact that it's not a linear relationship. Helping to manage the Hale Mill project, or the Solar Seal project, or the Reed and Hughes project, it's not a one-for-one linear association. But I think there is no question residual impact, if not in its simplest form, the relationship management that comes. And that requires time on the phone, time face-to-face, talking to the people who are the operators of these projects, and just maintaining and ensuring that they have faith and confidence in the city of Norwich. So I can't equate it to a spreadsheet that's filled out or a report that's turned in, but I think that there is time spent ensuring that these projects can succeed because they keep the faith with the city of Norwich. That's really where the value is, and the cost.
Absolutely, and I'm thinking, as they get complete and whatnot, the part of, like retail space, helping get those filled and things of that sort. So I get that piece. The last question I have, and it regards to, the second round of the revitalization program. I know the first program amount, you're working with the firm that is kind of helping to administer it. Do you plan on having to go out for another bid for another firm, or will this same firm help with that?
Unless something breaks, Alderman, we were going to stick with the horse we're riding right now.
Gotcha.
I would just tell you, I mean, it's a super timely question because, you know, they've really only been on the job now for about 2 weeks, and their initial performance has been phenomenal, not the least of which is taking on this Courtney request and turning a document and a budget assessment and a construction estimate on a dime for us to be able to be competitive in this community funding project request that Congressman Courtney's office put out. So here in the early days, I'll just tell you, I don't see us changing it. We won't have to go back out for RFQ, but you know, we have that option. I mean, if things don't go well, but I don't assume that's going to be the case.
Perfect, and I just wanted to know, like, I wouldn't want you to have two separate firms doing kind of the same work, so that's the only reason I asked that question, so thank you.
If I could just add while I have the podium, because it's literally temporal information, and it ties to everything that you're discussing right now. We did just push send and submit at 5 p.m. straight up for the RAISE grant for $24.7 million for the off-ramps, and we pushed send to Congressman Courtney's office at 5:35 right before he came up here on the earmark request. So those are both in the bank, and again, courtesy of a lot of good hard work by the folks that we've had to bring on board to augment our capability to do those things.
Thank you. Other questions, anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Pro Tem.
Kevin? So Leading Edge is the consultant that you and Alderman Wilson are referring to, and they're paid out of NCDC's revenues from the
program.
From the
ARPA
programs, that's what I was
allocation,
looking for,
right? So the 10% that I think the mayor spoke to earlier, they are being paid out of that amount. And believe me, we're a nonprofit organization.
Right.
And I have no intent to make money off of this. And every penny we pay them, as I said, so far so good, is really going to make a big difference in our ability to manage this thing. And I think also maintain a good relationship with the city building officials, the fire officials, and all the. You're going to get a good product out of this spend that's coming out of that 10%.
Thank you. Other questions, concerns? Thank you.
Okay, next budget is human resources. Bridget could not be here tonight. I'll take that. That's page 64. And the table organization and the budget line items are pretty much the same from this year. The one that's been trending up over the last 5 years has been professional services. That is primarily to do the testing of the various positions during the year. And we've had turnover, and we've had a couple of lists go out for police and fire. So we've had more testing than we have in the past. And so that number is what it was the last few years, but you see how it jumped a little bit this year. It also includes physicals, which have increased. These would be post-employment offer physicals, the employee assistance program, drug testing, specialized testing like polygraph. Police officers do have a polygraph and things like that. So a lot comes out of that line item. Other than that, I'll take any questions. If I can't answer them, I'll defer to Josh, or we'll get back to you with Bridget.
Members, Alderman Wilson?
The only thing, and I mean, he kind of touched on it within the professional service piece, but also exam piece. I know one of the conversations we had last year around budget time, and I know it's something that will be more or less discussed as we get underway with the equity work, is kind of looking at the various number of exams that have to take place for the various positions and seeing where different things may fit, whether, what type of examinations. Do you think looking at that possibly could change or increase or decrease not necessarily the need, but the overall cost possibly? So, so maybe moving from a possible written exam to an oral situation or things of that sort?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it does vary depending on the position. Some positions do not have a written test, they're just oral boards and skill tests, things like that. Others lend themselves more to a written examination. So they really vary per the position that's involved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Alderman Singh?
Just related to the Alderman Wilson question. So is there any kind of evaluation or some kind of input we also gonna get from citizens on different positions? How was their experience?
Yes, I couldn't follow that exactly.
So related to equity, right?
Yes.
If we're gonna give, let's say, employees some kind of training or do some kind of evaluation to make sure they are culturally competent to serve in those positions.
Yeah, we do that.
And-
Yeah. We have a budget. Usually, it's somewhat in here, but some is also in the individual budgets of the departments for appropriate training on various items. Not only equity awareness, but things like sexual harassment training, other components that make a good supervisor or employee a more well-rounded individual. So yes, we do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Pro Tem, please.
Thank you. John, are we experiencing the same exodus that we're seeing at the state level? I know that that's being prompted mostly by collective bargaining and certain agreements with certain deadlines built into them. But are we seeing an outflow of employees through retirements and resignations?
Certainly not to the extent that the state,
Right.
but we do have a new provision in our general pension plan that will lower the benefit for a spousal partner benefit. Now is at 90% of the pension with no contributions. That was a very costly item, and that's something that we negotiated to implement, and we did it we waited to have it implemented like over 3 years, so people would have a chance to take a look at it. But it is a benefit reduction in pension, because there's a cost now to get elected at 90% versus 50% versus no percent. If you have no percent, then there's nothing taken out of the pension. If you go for 50, it's less, and of course, if you go for 90, it's more of a deduction from the pension. That new pension provision goes into effect January 1st of 2023. And there are employees that either have retired or plan to retire prior to implementing that, because right now they still would be covered under the 90. That's the most significant pension change, I think, that is driving some of the changes. But we have a pretty good employee satisfaction rate, so it's not being driven by people that are not comfortable with what they're doing. I think that pension is driving some of them out. We have a few key employees that may be confronted on that, so it's something that when it was implemented, it was very logical to do it, because it's really out of the mainstream. Almost all pension plans There's an option to do those survivor benefits, but there's a cost to the employee to do that, and we didn't have that. So it was good, and we saved money on it actuarially. But the downside is that we may lose some of our most experienced employees because they want to get out under the deadline, which is similar to some of the things in at the state level, although they have a myriad of changes, much broader than ours.
And much smaller scale and more.
Right, exactly.
So we talk about employee satisfaction, so people aren't leaving because they're dissatisfied or disgruntled, but, first of all, the pandemic caused a lot of people to decide that they're gonna make a life change and not return to the status quo. Now that we've reopened, are we experiencing that? And when people do leave, because you talked about that institutional knowledge that's lost, right?
Yeah.
You get new employees, they're on the lower end of the scale, of the pay scale, at least for a little while, so you save a little bit of money, but you lose that institutional knowledge. So do we do exit interviews and, collect that information to say, as you go out the door, what recommendation would you make to, the next person who's gonna take over your job?
We do that. We have exit interviews, usually with human resources does them, although I do ones with the department heads, because they're kind of specialized questions that I want to ask. But we also are trying to do some overlap, where a position that's leaving, we hire a new person before the other person leaves, so they can pass on the institutional knowledge to the new person while they're still there. Orla is a good example of that. We have the deputy controller that's leaving in the summer, and we've hired Orla earlier so he can impart his wisdom to her. In addition, we've given her other additional duties that we were having a tough time doing, like she's the ARPA czar at this point now, and everything ARPA goes through Orla on that. So.
I hope she gets a crown or
So
something.
we tried to.
She's gonna get 10% like NCD.
That would be. She hasn't asked me for that yet.
I wasn't supposed to say that. I wasn't supposed to.
That's his Easter surprise.
The other part of it is we're trying to get into a situation where we have some continuity of future supervisors. Some departments are better than others with that. Like in Public Works, we have a pretty good system. We have a
Succession plans, you mean? Succession plans?
Yeah, assessor was a very good example of that. So we have that. In the smaller departments, it's tougher to have a succession plan. But we're keenly aware of that. And there's some departments that just don't have it, like community development. There's nobody within the department that has the credentials to take over for that position. But others that are larger have a little more flexibility with it.
So, and this is the last question, I promise. So, I know that at least as far back as my first term, and then over the last couple of years, we've talked about the idea of when we have increased outflow of people, retirements or otherwise, that's also an opportunity to take a look at the way we do business and the way that we're organized and make changes before a new person comes on board, right? Is that,
We do that.
part of our process as well?
Absolutely. Anytime we have a vacancy, especially a major vacancy, assistant department head or even department head, we look at, it's an opportunity to take a look at the organization and see if we can reconfigure that position into something else. We're looking at that now with the community development director. I don't want to get into any more details on that, but we are looking at that, and we've done that, and I'm trying to remember, I know we've done it in other departments too, and I can't,
But I look at the job description just about every time I mean, unless it's a position like revenue collection clerk where I think I've hired 8 in the last 3 years. I don't look at it every single time in that case, but, you know, I'll review the job description, make sure everything is in there is still relevant, or, you know, if there's anything really substantive, then it has to go to the union for approval for changes, but, yeah, we do that regularly.
Okay.
we did it for planning, actually, when Deanna came on board. We expanded her jurisdiction over some of the department and reconfigured now that the building inspection is different than it was. They used to be kind of parallel, and now there's a hierarchical relationship there. So let me think about it, because there's more than that, and I'm just drawing a blank on
I don't need all the
No,
examples. If you, the two of you say that you do it, I believe you.
Yeah, I know you do, but I gotta remember now anyway. It's driving me a little bit batty.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions? All set?
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Josh now. We have finance, the treasurer, and the assessor. Now, of course, the treasurer would have been here tonight, but he's recovering from surgery. Doing well. Josh, you want to make some general statements, and then we'll go from there?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. For anyone who hasn't met Orla yet, this is Orla McKieran and Raftery.
Yes, that's
Raftery. And she's working with Tony to get up to speed on deputy comptroller things. It's not taking her long. She was the finance director for Thompson, Connecticut, and she's taken over the ARPA grant processing without any trouble at all. So we're very happy to have her.
Thanks, Josh. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to
Looking
meet
forward
you.
to working with you.
Good to see you.
The only thing I didn't tell her what to wear tonight. When I do budgets, I never wear red. There's a
I'm in the wrong color.
subliminal thing with wearing red in a budget. I always wear dark colors on that. I didnn't prep her on that.
She didn't get the memo?
She'll never forget it now.
Betsy and I wore the same color today. We both met each other this morning and thought the same thing. It's budget day for our departments, and we're both wearing red.
John, do you want me to move my tie?
So nothing too out of the ordinary in the finance budget. I could kind of go over a few things that we've been doing in the last year or two, if you'd like. One of them is the theme in the finance department has been the high turnover, pandemic, and big projects. So we've had, once Tony retires, 70% of the employees between Treasury, Assessor's Office, and Finance will have fewer than 4 years of experience. So it's a lot of turnover. People, we bring in good people, and then they get promoted into other departments, or sometimes their old employer calls them and doubles their pay. So I'm glad that we've been able to attract all these bright people, and they, keep advancing in their career, but it makes it difficult for the tax office because it often affects them. For the big projects, we have the pension obligation bonds. I kind of tracked these things. So I alone spent about 270 to 300 hours on the pension obligation bond project. It was worth it. If we went through all that effort and it failed at referendum, or if interest rates shifted too quickly and it made it not feasible, that would have felt pretty awful. But it was definitely a worthwhile project. But that's between 8 and 9 weeks of work just on one thing. We also had We've been managing the FEMA grants for COVID-19 and Tropical Storm Isaias. For COVID-19, I've spent over 230 hours on that. Tropical Storm Isaias, did I say it right that time? I spent about 43 hours on that. That's just me. I know Public Works spent plenty of time on that, especially even just record keeping. So it's a lot of these things that just kind of throw off your normal schedule. Up till this point, I spent about 110 hours on the ARPA grant management, just understanding ARPA and all the reporting requirements before shifting it over to Orla happily. So it's been one of those years, or one of those 2.5 years.
It's been quite a difference. I'm glad that we don't pay Josh on the hourly rate billing, because he would be billing us more than his salary. So it's good that we don't want to get the idea that he bills his hours. He doesn't. Works many more hours than the allocated work week.
So that's kind of a quick overview of what we've been up to lately. If anyone has any questions.
Members, Alderwoman Gould.
It's maybe a little bit of a loaded question, Josh, but how is the transition and the Board of Education, us taking over all of their finances, so to speak?
Yeah,
How's that going?
It's challenging, but the folks at Norwich Public Schools have been really good to work with, and everyone wants to get this done well. There's a lot of improvements that we just got to find the time to, I think someone said fixing the airplane while you're flying it. That's what we're doing, and too bad the airplane wasn't fully built out when we turned over, but everyone's doing everything that they can to make this work well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Pro Tem?
So thank you for that, because I had that same exact question. I mean, we heard positive things from the BOE side about your office. So I'm happy to hear that relationship is building and it's going in the right direction. Pension obligation bond.
Yes.
Rough round numbers. What are our savings going to be in this upcoming fiscal year?
So without the pension obligation bonds, the city, including the schools and public utilities, would have paid $3 million more next year in pension costs than they will be with the pension obligation bonds.
So this might be a little bit of a loaded question, and not intentionally, but so it was my somewhat quiet hope that money would be earmarked for tax relief. Maybe not every single dollar of it, but a majority of it. In your position, from your chair, how feasible is that for the city to do?
So in the situation we're talking about, this year's pension contribution was scheduled for $13.7 million. That's all the departments altogether. So without the pension obligation bonds, next year's contribution would have been $16.7 million. So the pension obligation bonds, pension reserve fund, all of those things that you approved and the voters approved, kept it level and removed the spike. And it should be fairly level for several years, as long as there isn't, terrible things happen in the market, or cost of living adjustments are approved, or major plan changes are approved that cost more money. These costs should be pretty level going forward. And when you have something that's $13.7 million staying level, while the mill rate increase, the grand list increases, and hopefully other sources of revenues increase, that's how it can take pressure off of future budgets.
Okay, well, I'm taking it one step further to say that if we know what our contributions would have been without the pension obligation bond, and we know what they are, as you say, 13.7 staying relatively flat, that to me, I wonder, why are we having a mill rate increase? I mean, the obvious answer is that expenditures are increasing along, I guess, on every other line item. So it is a matter of controlling spending, right? Which is why we're up here, right? And why we work with the three of you, right? But that difference, that difference in what the city would have had to spend versus what we are going to spend is, well, I'm just going to say it should go back into the pockets of the taxpayers. And I don't know, because I don't have your level of expertise collectively, right, or individually for that matter, to figure out how we would establish that as, I know we couldn't codify it in terms of an ordinance. We can't bind future councils to certain, budget things. But if at least for the people who are sitting up here for this year and next budget year, and we make that commitment, could we do that? Could we say that this savings is going to go directly toward mill rate reduction?
Well, the budget's a big cake with a lot of ingredients, and this is one of them. So if we didn't save $3 million, and I don't know, the general fund portion of that might be a little under 2 million, maybe like 1.5 million or so, then the budget would be $1.5 million higher without the savings from the pension obligation bond, which would, either other things would be cut or the mill rate would go up more.
The other item that was disappointing this year, but not surprising, was the medical insurance. We've been very fortunate in the last few years. We've had single-digit increases.
Yeah.
This year it jumped 20%, and it's about $800,000. So it ate into half of the savings of the pension. Now, we didn't anticipate that a year ago. We were looking at the trend. Now, we're hoping, and that's why we can look at this, we're hoping that this is an anomaly based on the COVID people catching up with medical procedures that they didn't do during the black days of the pandemic. So they all were front-loaded in the last experience year. So it may flatten out next year, but that was about half the increase. It's a cookbook and it's a recipe. You look at the revenue, and the mill rate is the item that balances out the revenue. Our revenue was up a little bit in the grand list, but it was offset somewhat by the expenditure side. And our expenses at this point are still going up a little more than our revenue increases. Now, the idea would be to have growth only equal to any revenue increase, but that gap is there that we'd have to have drastic cuts. But that would be the goal. And if we had, it sounds like sour grapes, I don't mean it to be that.
No.
If we didn't have the medical insurance going up like it did, we would have been very close to probably having a zero increase budget this year. We did a lot of things in the last few years with collective bargaining to save money in the medical benefits field. We got to HSA and other methods of that. You get that dividend, but then it's baked into the numbers at that point, and then we are still self-insured, so we go with the flow in that sense. We have a lot of small claims rather than catastrophic ones, although we did have a few of those also, which are hard to predict.
And I understand it, but, I will say that, and this is a side note, but I'm going to remain skeptical that trusting a health insurance company is going to significantly lower its rates after bumping them up, 20% for this year, because I'm still waiting for lumber prices to come down.
Well,
to
what
something
will
that's
happen is
reasonable.
I don't think we'll reclaim the 20, but we will, but next year, it may be a 5% increase instead of a 20. So we're ahead of the game in that sense or something.
We're also self-insured, so we're not paying the profits of, insurance premiums for a
Only on our
insurance
stop
company.
loss, they get a little,
Right, stop
little bit
loss.
of profit.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm just expressing a frustration. It's not frustration with the three of you, but, we've been making these moves. You've been making these moves on the city's behalf, as you said, through collective bargaining, right, through the pension obligation bonds. The community supported that because it made sense. It was going to save the city money, yet the mill rate is still going up. And that's a problem for me. It's a problem for a lot of people.
Well, it's a problem for me.
I'm sure.
I was very disappointed. We try to do the budget, the first round is we try to budget for what we think is needed as a baseline. Then we put it into the blender and we see what the number actually is, and then we add the grand list to it and we see where we are, and then we start whittling it down from there. We went to a certain point and we felt we couldn't whittle anymore, that we'd be going backwards, and that's a policy decision at that point,
Right.
what we want to do. I've always prided ourselves that we give you an honest budget, not with a lot of fat in it, so to speak, and that's not always the case. People, they'll budget higher knowing they're going to get cut, so then they get back to where they were, but I think you know that we don't really do that in that sense. So, but I agree with you. It's frustrating.
That's all. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other members? Alderman Singh.
I have a easy question. So, seems like we are spending almost 55 grand just to collect the bad taxes. The position of a collector of delinquent taxes. So, is it the permanent person that we have, or is it some kind of third party, or?
Oh, no, that's a permanent position that serves as, they send out notices for delinquent statements and follow up, set up payment plans for delinquent customers, and kind of serve as the person in charge if the tax collector is out of town or ill. So that's a permanent position.
We have a good collection rate, as you see, with some of our outcome, and
Yeah, our collection rate last year was the highest since 1961.
Congratulations.
And do we know any numbers, like how much it was in dollars?
How much was?
Like total amount of bad taxes, let's put it that way?
Yeah. Yeah, it was 1,750,000 in prior year general fund collections. That excludes interest, but that's how much principal was collected from previous year levies.
Now, are all of these property owners like still there, or these are just the properties sitting there? Like, do you think we're gonna have success rate of collecting all that money, or is there any proactive steps we as a city can take to make it better?
Yeah, there are a number of steps. So we send out demands and follow up with statements, and then when it gets to a certain point, we turn them over to a collection agency, and they, you know, in the case of motor vehicles can be difficult to collect on because they move around. So they will, you know, have access to LexisNexis and do research on where that car and the owner currently are, and get the bills to them.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Other questions? All set? Thank you.
Go ahead, treasurer. It's on page 61. This budget is almost unchanged from previous years. I think we all know what benefit we get with the treasurer we have.
So since the interest rates have been ticking upward, Treasurer Mike Gualtieri is looking at laddering U.S. Treasury note investments. We started that last month. So we're getting 1 or 2 year U.S. Treasury notes, and instead of earning, I don't know, 0.2% in a money market account, we're earning 1.5% on a 1 year Treasury note or upwards, and those rates are continuing to increase. That makes us comfortable to increase our estimate for investment income next year.
That's the good with the bad. We're getting more income because interest rates are going up, and interest rates are going up because of inflation. So our savings get eaten up in higher costs.
He hopes to be back in 2 weeks.
Yep.
If there's no other questions on treasurer, then final is assessor on page 59.
Right behind us.
We had very good transition last year with Bill taking over the assessor's position, and it'll be a challenge next year because next year is a reval year, and that's when the assessor really kind of earns their stripes, so to speak. And but we're very, I don't want to embarrass him, but we're very pleased with his performance over the last year. And he is a good customer service person, and we have very little complaints from citizens. They're not always happy with their assessment, but they're not unhappy with at least how they were treated by the department. It's not easy bringing bad news to people sometimes, but the way you do it is a key to keeping people at least satisfied that you answered their questions. I'll turn it over to Bill if he has any comments or anything. If not, then we'll just take questions if you have anything you want to highlight, Bill.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Good evening.
Good evening.
John,
Excuse me, Bill, could you closer to the mic, please?
Bring it to yourself.
No, I don't know if it's on.
Or it might not be on.
hello? Yeah, you got me?
Good.
Sorry about that. So John hit on the major point that I wanted to get across is that we are about 18 months from reval, and the RFP will be going out shortly, and the process will be starting next fall. So that's it's on the horizon. So other than that, the budget hasn't changed much. The only difference is the assistant assessor position was only funded for 6 months last year, and this year it will be for the full year.
Thank you. Questions, members? Pro Tem, please.
Welcome. We've already emailed back and forth, and you were very informative. Thank you very much for that. My only question is your department fully staffed at this point?
Not currently.
Okay.
The assistant position is currently out for placement, so it's being actively, HR has it listed.
Okay, so it's posted?
It's posted.
Okay. And anticipate being able to find somebody to fill that?
I do hope so.
Well, and that's not an off-the-cuff thing, because Planning and Neighborhood Services is having a very difficult time finding building officials, right? So I don't know if are we having the same sort of challenges with people with the assessor credentials?
It is much tougher. There's a limited number of candidates out there right now in the assessment field due to a lot of retirements, and there's not enough people early in their career that are certified, which is a big hang-up for assistant assessors or assessors. So I'm hopeful, because at this point, like Josh had mentioned, I have two clerks, or clerk and an assessment analyst, that have less than 2 years experience each in my office. So, we went from 3 years ago having 80 years of experience in the assessment field to about 14, 15 now total. So coming up on reval, it's important that hopefully I find somebody.
So actually, I do have a second question. So will we contract out for the traveling roadshow, the people that go out and actually assess properties?
The reevaluation?
Yes, that's it, thank you.
Yes, that is a contracted service. The last reevaluation in 2018, I did all of the condos in-house to try to save some money on reevaluation, and that was a project that I could tackle. At that point, we were fully staffed, and we had 3 CCMAs on the staff between Carol, Donna, and myself at the time. That would certainly be something that I would like to do again. And it's just if it's only the 3 of us at reval, I couldn't take on valuing all the condos in the city to alleviate that from the RFP. But yes, everything other than the condos would be done through a vendor.
The good news on that is, because it's a 1 and 5 year event, we propose budgeting it in to pay the whole amount, not in the general fund this year. So, and it's qualified to be, so that's very fortunate.
What's that dollar amount?
250,000.
$250,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Alderman Singh?
Thank you, Bill. It was just in back of my mind. So with this, COVID and pandemic, house values have kind of, everything has gone up, right? So does assessments have gone up? Or do you think the census data will reflect or will provide you some data that you can just use for the assessments, or basically we depend upon the reevaluation process and how often we have to do those reevaluations when we go with the third party that we have?
Sure. So state law requires us to reevaluate every 5 years. So our last was 18. The upcoming will be 2023. Given the recent real estate values and their rise, it still hasn't affected the current assessments. Right?
Okay.
Because unless there's work done to a house, new construction, a demolition, assessments don't typically change in the interim. So the studies will be using sales from from probably now until October of 2023 to come up with new market values. So, all of the sales that are happening today and will happen for the next year and a half are going to dictate what the values are once we do that 10/1/23 reevaluation.
But do you think in 2023, of course, the total assessment is predicted to go up if market stays the way it is? Like how much extra money City of Norwich will be getting through that?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. Obviously, real estate values have been on the rise since we did our 2018 reevaluation. We see that daily in the sales that come across. If I had a crystal ball that could tell you what the values would be in 10/1/23, I should be in a different business. Honestly, to be my professional opinion is I don't think that the values can continue to rise from where we are right now.
Okay.
So I think I see the market at least stabilizing here. But that said, these values are higher than what we currently have on most of the homes. But the reevaluation process will dictate what the values will be in '23.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bill, just one quick question. Is this a mass or statistical reval this year coming up?
Yeah, so this is just statistical.
Statistical,
Yes.
okay. As the prior one, they had to actually visit every single property required.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
That concludes, tonight, we're right on target for 7:30, I think, we're close, maybe 2 minutes off for the public hearing. Mayor.
Because I stayed sign-up sheet. What's that? Because I stayed.
I'm going to move up so I don't have my back to the audience.
No, we're going right up. Yeah. Hope I can read all this. Oh, really?
Right.
But you can't email us an update. Oh, I sent it. We're doing a public safety. I'll talk, yeah. Cold?
Last night, I'm sitting here sweating.
Did it to mdriscoll@citynorwich.org? No. He didn't reject it. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to this public hearing on this year's proposed budget. We did have a list outside, and people did sign up ahead of time, so I'm going to start with that list. Mr. Martin Ruchek, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Mr. City Manager, Mr. Driscoll, and the lady on the end, I don't know. My name is Martin Ruchek. I grew up here, spent most of my life here, practiced law right up the street, have memories of standing here. It wasn't the same carpeting, but in the 60s, I was an alderman. Why am I here? I'm here because for years I have observed the diversity of the city of Norwich, made up of children, families from all walks of life. And I have been all too sensitive to the fact that children don't have parents to bring them to Little League activities and other things that are going on in the community. Single-family mothers, fathers working, they just don't have the time. And you'll see that you don't have much diversity in these activities. These children are not at the golf course, and these children are not playing on the clay tennis courts, and they, in all likelihood, are not playing hockey. So, why am I here? I'm here because Norwich needs a community facility with a swimming pool. We don't have one since we lost the YMCA. That went underground, and besides, it was kind of small. It might have been good for a dipping pool for certain religious people, but that's about it. Now, you look at East Lyme, I'm now living in Mystic. There's a pool there. That community population, what, 10, 12,000 people? Mystic, Westerly have marvelous YMCAs with all kinds of programs, swimming pools, abilities for children to come, maybe buses also. So, what I'm asking is an allocation be made, funds be set aside to investigate and explore the feasibility of a community center or a swimming pool. It's been talked about for a long time. In fact, most of you don't recall, but when the Norwich Free Academy put in their new gym, I'm almost ready to go, when they put in their new gym, a pool was to have been included. So, I think it's time to act. And I think it's nice to have things to visualize. It's nice to take care of the wetlands or the water problems or the pond. But we've got to improve the quality of living for those families that can't really pick up and go to Ocean Beach, or go to the shore, or take a ride to Nantucket. I thank you for listening, and I hope that some monies will be allocated to explore. One other thing, in talking to some people, they said, wouldn't it be a great thing to put it up near the senior center, because the junior high school is across the street, and all the kids could go from the junior high, go swimming in the pool. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Rona Ruchik, please? No? Okay, thank you. Beryl Fishbone, please.
Beryl Fishbone, 19 Bliss Place. Just a reminder that the ARPA funds, the purpose was to support public health expenditures, address negative impacts caused by the public health emergency, replace lost public sector revenue, provide premium pay for essential workers, and invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. That includes, and this was added later, water, wastewater, and stormwater. Those were the purposes. They weren't some of the things that were outlined in the manager's proposed 22-23 budget. And some of them are really terrific and would help Norwich tremendously. But you know that I can't do that. I gotta lower some things so that we can add a few things. Historic Norwich tourism, a zero, we really need to open up the gateways, make them pretty again. Plant the flowers, do the nice things. And if anybody wants seeds, see me after the meeting. But $50,000 there would be more than adequate. The Cedar Woods Reserve, the new Avalonia land, again, that's a $50,000 project. The Slater Memorial Museum roof restoration, I'm really sorry they need a new roof. Every 100 years you do need one, but we don't need to be funding that right now. The Reed and Hughes building, before I want to give another dime towards that building, What I would like to see is a list of all of the money that we've already put into the building. The Hale Mill renovation, that sounds good. But again, that would be $100,000, and I have questions whether or not the ARPA money can be used as a loan. Because the last I heard, it still could not. That one of the other cities has been taken to task for that. Changing the way of Broadway, that sounds really good. But widening the sidewalks, not an expense that the city needs to do. Putting money towards the commissary of the TVCCA, sounds good. The walk-in cooler, absolute yes. The crisis response and trauma, absolutely. The Uncas Leap Heritage Park, I still don't understand why we're funding it at all, because that could have been done for free. The drainage repairs, replacements in the Ox Hill Brook, you know I gotta be in favor of that. And I'm not even sure that this money is gonna cover those. I'd like to see the plans. By the way, the drainage is still blocked. And if we have a bad rainstorm, you'll be able to see the water. We can already see the water in one of those drains. The revaluation, we don't have a list. When I added up the proposals for the round 2 requested funds on the continued page, I'm $97,535 off. And so I'm looking at those figures very closely, and I'm hoping that you will. I'd also like to see funded in full the public safety system expansion, not just in half, but let's do the whole thing, let's do it right. This is safety. These are our concerns for our citizens, not just the citizens today, but the citizens tomorrow. I'd also like to see the Mo Peep building completely renovated, and not for storage, but for use. I miss those classes. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder, please state your name and address when you come to the microphone, and the standard set time is 3 minutes. Thank you. Coach Derek Smith. Yeah, no? Okay, thank you. Regan Minor.
Good evening. My name is Regan Minor, and I reside at 67 East Town Street. I am the Executive Director of the Norwich Historical Society, and our mission is to preserve, protect, and promote the rich history of Norwich. I'm here to request that the City Council fund the following projects through the American Rescue Plan Act: the NHS Historic Norwich Tourism Plan, the Uncas Leap Heritage Park, and the roof restoration of the Slater Memorial Museum. Since the Norwich Historical Society's Historic Norwich Tourism Plan was mentioned, but not recommended for funding at the April 4th council meeting, I brought the proposal with me to share with you this evening, and I'll give it to Betsy after. The Historic Norwich Tourism Plan focuses on building and marketing Norwich as a heritage tourism destination. The definition of heritage tourism is, quote, traveling to experience the places and activities that authentically represent the stories and people of the past, end quote. Norwich is authentic, and our core resources are here. Heritage tourism can be a vehicle to address a host of issues affecting Norwich's competitiveness, identity, quality of life, and prosperity. Our long-range goal is to build the capacity of existing historic resources and create a walkable outdoor museum experience in the living history neighborhood of Norwich Town. Think unauthentic Sturbridge Village. These resources require some investment to make them visitor-ready and will ultimately be enriched by diverse and inclusive programs and exhibits. Our first step is to create a campus at the Leffingwell House Museum. The circa 1675 Leffingwell House Museum will be the museum space, and the circa 1763 David Greenleaf House, located directly next door to the property, will be the multi-purpose event space and will be connected to city sewer and be handicapped accessible for visitors. NHS has a track record of collaborating with other organizations, NHS and the Society of the Founders of Norwich, who own and operate the Leffingwell House Museum, partner on programs and projects. NHS sits on the Uncas Leap Steering Committee, and NHS has a long-standing relationship with the Slater Museum. Using the American Rescue Plan funds for these 3 projects will help promote our city as the region's premier historical and cultural center. This in turn would build revenue, encourage more people to visit, and view Norwich as a vibrant place to live, work, and play. I encourage the City Council to fund the Uncas Leap Heritage Park, the Slater Memorial Roof Restoration Project as proposed, and fund the Historic Norwich Tourism Plan from the unallocated $3 million. I realize that NHS is one of many groups requesting funds for their projects, so even partial funding would be welcomed and very appreciated. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Dane Rue, please.
Good evening, Dane Rue, 67 East Town Street. I wanted to say that the American Rescue Plan was passed with a very clear purpose and objective, and that was to not only aid cities and states and organizations with recovery from the pandemic, but to also support jobs and support infrastructure. And in this case, we have an enormous once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make real investments into the cultural infrastructure of Norwich. And perhaps I'm a bit biased in saying that, but it's an area where this city truly shines. Slater Memorial Museum, in addition to Leffingwell House Museum, the Uncas Leap Heritage Park, and many other factors of this city play a crucial role in developing this city's cultural infrastructure. And that being said, this investment, again, is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And you will know that with a proven success and track record of all of these organizations, that the investment will be well used. And I do appreciate and want to acknowledge great support that the city manager has decided to propose funding for these areas. These are many of which are projects that have been planned for a number of years now, and this is the opportunity to see them to a successful completion. And so I thank you for the consideration of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bill Champagne.
Good evening. I'm Bill Champagne, 7 Northwest Corner Road, Preston, and I'm the immediate past president of the Norwich Historical Society. Excuse me. And for the last several years, I have been working closely with Regan Miner, who has just spoken, and the rest of the board of directors of the Norwich Historical Society on a project we are calling the Heritage Triangle. We are asking for $500,000 from ARPA money, and I would like to try to paint a picture in 2 minutes, it's tight, of what we envision as a strong component of economic development, heritage tourism. You all know NFA and Slater Memorial Museum and what a gem that landmark is. You all know Uncas Leap. With the completed Uncas Leap Heritage Park, that property will be an anchor for heritage tourism in Norwich. You all know the Leffingwell House Museum, and joining the adjacent 18th century house, when restored, will create an historic campus which will be handicapped accessible. Then you add the Norwich Town Green, the Visitor Center, the adjacent 1772 silversmith shop, the East District Schoolhouse, the Diane Manning House, all buildings from the 18th century, all open to the public, which is pretty amazing. And you couple that with the Norwich Town Burial Ground and the Meadows, we've got a memorable, walkable, historic experience. Norwich has 400 years of history within 1 mile, and I can't think of any other town that can say that. Area residents and visitors alike can learn about lots of relevant things: Native Americans, Norwich's significance in the Revolutionary War, African Americans, the first president of Haiti who lived in the Diane Manning House, education in the 18th century, to name a few. And I think I'm going to run out of time. I'll keep scrambling until it stops. If you've been to the Leffingwell House Museum or the Norwich Town Green during an event, you would see hundreds of people happily experiencing history. If you've been on an Uncas Leap tour, you have seen groups of sometimes 60 or 80 people fascinated to learn more about the history and relationship between the Mohegan tribe and the city of Norwich. During these events, sometimes half of the people are from Norwich, half visiting from outside the area, and many are asking, where's a good place to eat and where's a good place to stay? With the right marketing, creating a heritage triangle between Uncas Leap, Slater, and Norwich Town, we can make Norwich a place people want to come to, and that can only benefit all of Norwich. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nick, kosher? Casher? You are all set. And Meg as well? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else like to speak to the council concerning the agenda tonight, which is the budget of the city and ARP? It's anything there. Mrs. Filbert.
Good evening, Joanne Philbrick, Norwich Town. I would like to tell you that I am almost 80 and my health is declining dramatically. If you, and you know who you are, had responded to my mails, it would have been unnecessary for me to come out this evening. But you don't, so I did. I have no doubt that my comments this evening will fall on deaf ears. I have sat where you have sat. I have been active in Norwich politics for 18 years. I have a lot more experience than a lot of you sitting up there, but still you disregard me. It's disheartening. I also want to say that 3 minutes to discuss, to vent, discuss, share opinions on a multi-million-dollar budget and the ARP funds is disingenuous to the taxpayers. 3 minutes. So what I'm going to say, I had to make a list because I just don't have the mental acuity anymore. Your antics cause me a great deal of anxiety. I live here. I pay taxes. I am entitled to a quality of life. My quality of life revolves around my Social Security check. I don't have some fancy ass pension from the city of Norwich. I live on my Social Security. Mr. Nystrom asked me why I don't apply for funds. And the short answer is I have a very small IRA that eliminates my participating in any sort of public assistance. So what I'm going to say is I believe the proposed budget and the ARP funds are irresponsible. Raising taxes is not the answer. What I've asked for the last 19 years, what is the plan? How many more times are you going to try and resurrect the Reed and Hughes? A boutique hotel in Yantic? Look up the definition of boutique. It means fashionable and sophisticated. There ain't nothing about Norwich that is fashionable or sophisticated. I know a portion of the budget has to go toward, the capital improvement is based upon the budget. But seriously, $60,000 for the MRAP? The MRAP that's been sitting over at Fleet Maintenance now for what, 5 years, 6 years? This is a priority for the city manager? Are we heading toward urban pacification? And if you know what don't know what that means, look it up. It's time to accept the reality that Norwich has seen its heyday. We have become the social service mecca of southeastern Connecticut. The budget can attest to that. So much of Norwich screams desperation and decay. Drive around. Surely you see it. Surely you must see it. Beryl talked about it. Every gateway to this city is a dump. I've heard for years and years that this is the way we've always done it. It's not working. It hasn't worked for 18 years. Peter, I remember 18 years ago when Andy Depka, Karen Neely, and I used our own money, and we walked around this city handing out flyers for the downtown revitalization. That was 18 years ago. Something has to give. Something has to give, or else we are going to become, I don't even want to say what we're going to become. And my last question to you is, how are you going to manage the upkeep on all these new projects? You're going to create 9 new positions, and you know as well as I do that once that little window is closed, it'll be like, oh, well, we need this, and so we're going to have to find more money. We're going to have to find more staff to cut the grass, to empty the trash, to heat the building, to pay the lights. Please, we are on the cusp of a mill rate of 50. Who in their right mind would want to open a business here and pay those kind of taxes? I'm just going to say one more thing about the MRAP. And again, and I know some of you say that you don't get the emails, but I had Leon, who is absolutely wonderful, do a little forensic audit. And his words, and I don't like to put Leon on the receiving end, but he told me you are indeed receiving emails, and what he said was, I have no control over whether they respond or not, but they are getting them. So, I just don't know. I can't, I'm fortunate, I own my own home, but I cannot afford to live here anymore. Half of my Social Security check goes to budgeting for my taxes and my utility bills. I don't have a fancy cell phone, I don't have a cell phone. I can't afford it. I don't have cable TV, I can't afford it. So you need to seriously consider that you represent all the members of this community. So when I bring an issue forward, I use a walker now. If I fall on a city street, I will get myself the best attorney in the world, and I will sue your ass. Because I have brought this to your attention on numerous occasions, and you don't respond. You don't even give me the courtesy of thanks but no thanks. And it makes me sad. And it makes me angry. Would you treat your grandmother like this? I had a conversation, and this is the last thing I'm going to say because I'm going to talk. I had a gentleman in this community is running for another political office, and he said that the children are our future. And I said, what about the seniors? And he said, the children are our most valuable asset. So you tell the World War II veteran, or the Vietnam veteran, or the police officer, or the firefighter from 30, 40 years ago, who did their job, who gave their time to their community, that they don't matter, because all that matters is the children. And you all know what kind of a generation we're raising. We need to invest in our children, yes, but you also need to acknowledge and invest in the elderly and the disabled who have paid their debt to society. It makes me sad. It makes me so sad. So you will do what you need to do, and I have no confidence that things are going to change, but I cannot sit idly by and not say something. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Thank you. Please.
Good evening. My name is Richard Pascal of 15 Stony Ridge Road, and I also work in Norwich downtown. Standing here to speak against part of the city manager's plan for the ARP funds, specifically the part about hiring. It seems to me that in business, and at some level we need to operate like a business, you would not create a multi-year expense when you have the 1 year of revenue, right? So we're going to get the grant now, but if you're creating positions, you're not going to presumably fire these people. So you're creating a multi-year expense that's essentially unfunded and therefore would ultimately put pressure on to increase the mill rate, which is one of the highest in the state. It also seems at approximately $167,000 per position to be excessively expensive. And finally, it just seems an inappropriate use of the funds, as somebody outlined earlier, what was the mission of the rescue plan funds. So on all these bases, I'm asking you, whatever you do with the projects and whatnot, but nothing include hiring as part of the ARP funds. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak to council tonight on budget? Yes, please.
Good evening, Sheila Hayes, 382 Laurel Hill Avenue. First, I'd like to start off in saying that I'd like to commend the Norwich Board of Education. This is the first time in a long time that they have come in with a budget that is under 3%, closer to 2%. I do know I attended the Board of Education meeting on Tuesday, and the business manager was even looking at additional ways that he could cut the budget of the school board. I'm hoping that that does happen, and they can get closer to 2% or lower. So that's one of the areas that I would say is a major change from what we've seen in the past. I will agree, there are a lot of things I do agree with Mrs. Philbrook. I said I realize that a lot of times people may not like the way she delivers the message, but the message needs to be heard, that people are hurting. And it's not just, and all of you know that I do a lot of work with youth, but individuals are hurting, families are hurting, seniors are hurting in the city. And to have an increase in the mill rate is, I just think, is going to be devastating to families and individuals who are living on the very close edge, and all they need is one catastrophe, one hiccup in their life. And I hate to say it, I was reading an article where we're seeing more and more individuals and families and seniors choose homelessness over continuing to try to go in debt and not be able to afford a decent place to live. So my appeal to you with this upcoming budget is that you be mindful. 2 years of this pandemic, the number of people who have been unemployed, the number of health, just mental and physical health issues that people are enduring right now, it is devastating. And to put additional burden on families and individuals, I just don't think that's a wise decision to do at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the council at this time? Again, would anyone else like to speak to us about the city budget and or the ARP proposals? Again, anyone else like to speak to us at this? Yes, sir.
John Blackburn, 15 Alice Street, Norwich, Connecticut. I've lived here all my life, and I'll be honest with you. I watch the news. You go to bed at night. It is very depressing. It's a bad dream. You wake up, put the news on, it's a nightmare. Every day. It is ridiculous. This is not the country I grew up in. I went to war, went to Vietnam, and you know what? I don't like it, but there's not much we can do about it. And Washington's answer is tax the rich. Okay, that's working real well, because we're all getting it, no matter which way we turn. Go to the gas station, go to the grocery store, no matter where you go, we're getting it. The prices are going up. Wages are not going up as fast. People who live on Social Security alone or have very little pension to live on, they're hurting. I'm a little more fortunate because I worked most of my life. I'm collecting Social Security. Fortunately, I went to work down the sub-base and worked for the federal government. I have a bit of a pension there. Thank goodness for that. Out of working there 28 years of my life. But still, times are tough. Everybody is hurting. We all are. And I live in a CCD with the paid fire department and mill rate the way it is, 49 mills. Oh, might as well say it might as well be 50 mills. It's ridiculous. Something needs to be done. And here we go, Board of Education. I know, sure they're not asking more than 3%, but every year goes up and up and up. What you paid this year, you're going to be paying, because that's the bottom line, the starting point for next year. So you got to add on to that. And something needs to be done. Even the town taxes, what, 45 mils plus? And they have a volunteer fire department. That's still a lot of money. And here we go. They're going to reduce the taxes on the car tax. Whoop-de-doo. What about the property tax? So you're gonna lower that end, raise the other end. Something needs to be done, and I agree. Most of you get the message. The taxes are too high. You need to do something about it. I'm with you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Again, anyone else like to speak to the council this evening? Again, anyone like to speak to us? Again, budget as proposed and/or ARPA fund distribution as proposed. Again, one last time, does anyone else like to speak to the council about anything before us this evening? Then seeing no one else, thank you all for attending. Thank you for sharing your concerns at this time, and I declare this hearing closed. Thank you.